So, you want to march across miles of sharp rocks, thorny trails, and sun-baked dirt with nothing but your tender pink feet. Great. But before you go stomping off like you're auditioning for a Flintstones marathon, let me tell you one thing. Caveman didn't just wake up, scratch themselves, and bolt straight into the wilderness. They knew that a cold start is how you go from fearless hunter to pathetic human, limping after stepping on a pine cone. Warming up your feet and legs was survival. 101. Imagine this. It's dawn in the Stone Age. The fire has gone out. The tribe is cranky, and the chief is yelling that you have to follow a herd of mammoths 20 miles away. Do you think Og the Caveman just stood up and sprinted? Nope. He spent 5 minutes doing something that, today, would look suspiciously like a CrossFit session mixed with yoga for hobbits. He flexed his toes in the dirt, rolled his ankles in circles, squatted to loosen his knees, and this is my favorite, stump rhythmically on a log to toughen his soles before he even took a step. Because here's the deal. Your feet aren't just fleshy pancakes at the end of your legs. They're loaded with muscles, tendons, and nerves that freak out the moment you slam them onto rough terrain. Without a proper warm-up, your first few steps feel like someone's jabbing your foot with hot needles. But if you do a little caveman calisthenics, you trick your brain and your skin into thinking, okay, maybe this won't kill me. The warm-up starts with toe drills. Spread your toes in the dirt, curl them into little claws, and drag them back like you're trying to scratch your name into the ground. This strengthens the tiny muscles that usually do nothing except help you complain when you stub your pinky toe on a chair. Next comes ankle rolls. Cavemen would balance on one leg, wave the other foot in big circles, and wobble like a drunk flamingo. Why? Because if your ankles aren't flexible, the first hidden stone you step on will twist your joint so badly you'll invent the word ouch 3,000 years before dictionaries existed. After that, they did what modern runners call calf raises, but in caveman style, balancing on a rock, lifting their heels up and down, making their calves burn so they wouldn't collapse mid. And then came the slapping ritual. They literally slapped their feet smack, smack, smack right on the soles, like they were trying to wake them up. Weird, maybe. Effective, definitely. It brings blood to the surface, toughens the skin, and sends a signal to the nervous system. Hey buddy, get ready. We're about to walk on lava disguised as gravel. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, but I don't have logs to stomp or mammoths to chase, relax. Modern barefoot adventurers can cheat with warm concrete, flat stones, or even wooden floors. The principle is the same. Simulate impact before the real punishment begins. Do little hops, jumps, or fast walks in place. Make your feet feel alive, not shocked. And don't forget balance practice. Stand on one foot until you almost tip over. Cavemen did it to stay ready for uneven ground. You can do it so you don't faceplant in front of your friends. Here's another trick. Cavemen condition their feet by stepping on different textures before a journey. Think of it as a prehistoric spa treatment, minus the cucumber water. Soft grass, damp soil, pebbles, even the prickly brush. By exposing their feet to micropain early, they built tolerance. Like dipping your hand into cold water before jumping in the river. You get the shock out of the way so the real thing doesn't feel like death. And let's not forget the mental side. Yes, cavemen meditate. Before long treks, they'd sit, stare at their filthy toes, and breathe slowly, convincing themselves that pain was part of the adventure. Was it mindfulness? Was it denial? Probably both. But the point remains. If you start with the mindset, this will hurt, but I can handle it, you're halfway to success. Now, you might laugh at the idea of warming up your feet, but think of it like this. Professional athletes warm up before games. Singers warm up before concerts. Even your car needs to warm up on a cold morning. So why wouldn't you warm up the only equipment that's about to carry your body for miles? Skip it, and you'll be limping like a wounded caveman, begging for someone to carry him on a stretcher made of sticks. So yes, the barefoot warm-up is not optional. It's the line between walking like a warrior and waddling like a penguin with bad knees. Do it right, and you'll be surprised how far you can go. Do it wrong, and you'll be sitting on a rock crying while your tribe walks off into the sunset without you. And trust me, no one waits for the guy with blisters on day one. In other words, treat your feet like VIPs. Roll them, slap them, stomp them, stretch them. Because in the Stone Age, your feet were your car, your bike, your Uber, and your getaway vehicle. If they fail, you fail. Warm them up, and you might just survive long enough to tell the story. All right, so your feet are warmed up. Your toes are flexed like tiny caveman claws, and your ankles are wobbling but alive. Congrats, you've made it past the warm-up. which means you're officially ready to walk into the landmine field that Mother Nature calls the outdoors. Because here's the thing, walking barefoot isn't just about having tough soles. It's about strategy, knowing where to step, what to avoid, and how to trick the ground into being slightly less of a sadistic torture device. Cavemen understood terrain like it was their personal Netflix series. Every bump, every crack, every pile of sticks told a story. A wet patch of moss, that's a comfy foot pillow. A shiny patch of pebbles, that's basically Stone Age Legos avoid at all costs. Step in the wrong place and suddenly you're hopping on one leg, screaming like you've been shot with an arrow. The first rule of barefoot survival, the ground is not your friend. The ground is actively plotting against you. Let's start with soft ground, the easy mode. Grass, sand, moss, wet soil. That's the dream. Cavemen loved these stretches because they could actually relax, almost strut like they were kings of the world. But even soft terrain hides tricks. Sand can burn hotter than a skillet under the noon sun. Moss can cover slippery rocks that send you face first into a tree. Grass might be hiding sticks sharper than your grandma's knitting needles. Moral of the story, don't get cocky. Every step deserves respect. Now, the real battlefield. Hard, rocky ground. This is where cavemen turned into strategists. You don't just slam your heel down like you're stomping grapes. Nope, you switch to stealth mode. Tiptoes first. Then roll the rest of the foot down like you're sneaking through your ex's backyard at 2 a.m. That way, your brain has a split second to scream, abort mission, before your full weight comes crashing down on a jagged rock. It's the prehistoric version of walking on Lego landmines with style. Cavemen also used path scanning. Picture this. Before moving forward, they'd stand still and squint at the ground ahead like detectives studying a crime scene. They weren't being dramatic, they were calculating. Where's the smoother line? Where are the shadows hiding potential hazards? They'd zigzag, curve, or even backtrack just to save their feet a little agony. Today, hikers call it route finding. Cavemen called it not crying halfway through the hunt. Another pro move, terrain rhythm. Ever notice how marathon runners pace themselves? Cavemen did the same, but with surfaces. Hard dirt path, slow down. Smooth sand strip, speed up rocky chaos. Minimize contact, keep steps light. By changing their gait with the ground, they reduced strain and avoided injuries. It's like dancing with the earth, except the earth has spikes. And it really doesn't want to dance with you. Let's talk about water crossing. Cavemen loved them for one reason, free foot massage. Walking through a stream meant washing dirt out, cooling blisters, and numbing pain. But streams also came with slippery rocks that could send you flat on your back. That's why cavemen tested each step with their toes first, like dipping your finger in soup before chugging it. They learned to shuffle across instead of lifting their feet high, lowering the chance of a surprise pratfall. Here's the part modern people forget. Speed kills. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the blister sense. Sprinting across gravel might get you ahead for 20 steps, but then you'll be hobbling like an injured goat. Cavemen balanced efficiency with caution. Think of it like driving. You can gun it for a bit, but most of the trip is about control, not raw power. And let's not ignore weather. Cavemen knew hot ground could fry souls faster than a steak on fire. They planned journeys at dawn or dusk, using cooler times to cover more distance. In the rain, mud made paths easier on feet, but also trickier to balance. And snow. Oh, snow was hell. They'd hop between patches of brush, use animal hides for short bursts, or just grit their teeth and pray their feet didn't turn into ice cubes. Terrain was more than ground, it was survival chess. Want to survive modern barefoot travel? Steal these tricks. Scan ahead like a paranoid caveman. Change your gait depending on terrain. Don't rush when the ground turns nasty. Look for patterns, animal trails, smoother soil patches, shaded areas where the sun hasn't baked the dirt into lava. And if all else fails, do what cavemen did best. Improvise. Step sideways. Use your hands for balance. Crawl if you must. Pride means nothing when your feet are on fire. Because here's the truth. Every long barefoot journey is basically a negotiation with the earth. You give a little, it takes a little. Treat it with respect, and it lets you pass. Get careless, and you'll be limping into camp while everyone else laughs and eats the mammoth you were too slow to catch. So, terrain and strategy aren't optional. They're the invisible shoes that keep you alive. Remember, cavemen didn't have Nikes, but they had brains, and brains beat blisters most of the time. So, you've warmed up your feet and learned how to dance across terrain like a paranoid deer. Great, but here's the brutal truth. No amount of clever stepping saves you if your soles are still as soft as marshmallows. Cavemen knew this. That's why they treated the skin on their feet like medieval knights treated their armor, thick, calloused, and ready to take a beating. Without it, you're just a barefoot tourist waiting to get skewered by the first thorn bush. Let's clear something up. Calluses aren't ugly mistakes your body makes. They're nature's shoes. Cavemen didn't buy sandals, they grew them. Day after day of barefoot travel hardened the skin until it felt like leather. And trust me, once your soles are leathery, stepping on pebbles is less scream and hop and more meh. Just another Tuesday. The process wasn't instant, though. It took weeks, even months, of deliberate conditioning to build that natural armor. How did they do it? Step 1. Gradual exposure. Cavemen didn't start by sprinting across lava rock fields. They eased into it. First soft dirt, then dry grass, then gravel, then sharper stones. It's the Stone Age version of leveling up in a video game. Beat the easy bosses before facing the final boss of jagged shale cliffs. Each new surface toughened the skin just enough to prepare for the next challenge. Modern barefoot runners call it progressive conditioning. Cavemen called it not bleeding to death. Step 2. Friction training. Cavemen weren't shy about dragging their feet, grinding them against bark, or even stomping in circles on abrasive stone. It sounds ridiculous, but rubbing the skin deliberately toughens it like sanding wood until it's smooth and strong. Some tribes even had rituals where young hunters would walk on heated stones to prove their toughness. Spoiler, the ones who screamed too loud didn't get invited to the next mammoth hunt. Step 3. Natural treatments. Yep, cavemen had foot care routines. Think less pedicure salon, more swamp chemistry. They smeared clay or ash on their feet, which dried and hardened into a protective crust. They soaked in streams or mud to cool the skin after long treks, preventing cracks. And when skin split open, they slapped on crushed leaves or resin as primitive band-aid. Imagine explaining to your friends that tree sap saved your foot from falling off. Cavemen didn't care. They were just glad to keep walking. Now, here's the gross but fascinating part. Calluses don't just protect from sharp stuff. They also spread out pressure. If your soles are thin, every rock feels like a spike. But with thickened skin, the force distributes. So it's like stepping on a rounded pebble instead of a dagger. In other words, calluses turn stabbing pain into mild annoyance. That's a huge upgrade when you're crossing 20 miles of hostile wilderness. And let's not forget the psychological power. A caveman with armored feet walked taller. He wasn't tiptoeing like a nervous rabbit. He stumped with confidence, knowing his soles could handle the abuse. That confidence fed into endurance. If you believe your feet are invincible, you push farther before pain catches up. Modern science backs this up. Athletes with tougher skin endure longer because their brains perceive less threat. Cavemen didn't know neuroscience, but they knew swagger. Of course, there were limits. Armor too thick cracks, just like old leather. That's why cavemen balanced toughness with care. After long journeys, they cooled their feet in streams, rubbed them with fat or oils from animals, and rested on soft moss. This wasn't luxury, it was maintenance. Even the strongest warrior can't fight with busted gear. Feet were sacred tools, and they got treated as such. Want to replicate this today? Start small. Walk barefoot around your house, then your yard, then gravel paths. Skip the shoes occasionally. Let your soles remember what they're for, and don't rush it. If you jump straight into hiking trails barefoot, you'll look like a hero for 10 minutes and a disaster for the next 3 days. Cavemen built their armor slowly, brick by brick, callus by callus. And yes, your feet will look rougher. Forget pretty, soft soles. The Stone Age didn't care about beauty contests. Thick, yellowish calluses were badges of honor. They meant you could chase prey, escape predators, and survive long Think of them as prehistoric medals strapped permanently to your body. You didn't earn a shiny trophy, you earned feet that could walk across a cactus patch without tears. So when people today complain about calluses, cavemen would laugh. Soft feet meant weakness, fragility, dependency. Hard feet meant freedom. Freedom to walk anywhere, anytime, without begging for sandals or crying over sharp gravel. And in a world where survival was one blister away from disaster, that kind of freedom was priceless. In short, cavemen knew the secret. Treat your skin like armor, not decoration. Because in the end, tough soles weren't just about walking. They were about living by now. Your feet are basically tanks warmed up, armored with calluses, and marching like you own the ground. But even the toughest caveman soles have a breaking point. After miles of jagged rocks, scorching dirt, and ambush attacks from hidden thorns, your feet are crying for mercy. That's when cavemen turned to the ultimate survival spa treatment: water and mud. Forget modern gels and fancy creams. This was the Stone Age version of a deluxe pedicure, and it worked better than half the junk we buy today. Picture a caveman at the end of a brutal trek. His feet are hot, swollen, and cracked. He's limping like a drunk mammoth. Then he spots a stream. What does he do? He drops everything and plunges those throbbing feet straight into the cold water. Instant relief. The burning stops, the swelling eases, and for a glorious few minutes, it feels like heaven. Streams and rivers weren't just for drinking. They were the emergency ice packs of the Stone Age. Cold water numbed pain, flushed out dirt, and gave feet a second chance to keep going. But cavemen didn't stop at water. They leveled up with mud. Mud was the miracle cure. Step into a patch of thick, cool mud, and suddenly your soles were coated in nature's armor. It cushioned every step, kept skin from drying out, and even blocked some sharp pebbles from stabbing too deep. Cavemen literally smeared mud on their feet before long, treks turning their soles into muddy boots. Bonus: mud dried into a crusty layer that worked like a disposable sandal when it cracked off. You just reapplied. Zero cost, zero complaints. And here's the sneaky trick: mud also helped with infections. See, cavemen didn't have antiseptic spray, but mud packed with certain plants or minerals slowed down swelling and kept wounds from festering. Of course, not all mud was safe. Step into swamp muck and you might end up with leeches gnawing at your toes. But clear, mineral-rich mud, that stuff was gold. It was their neosporin and moisturizer rolled into one. Another rescue move was the herbal wrap. Cavemen noticed that certain leaves soothed burning soles, like wrapping feet in giant green bandages. Plantain leaves, moss, even strips of bark soaked in water were strapped around feet to hold moisture in and shield against friction. Imagine strapping salad to your toes and calling it footwear. Ridiculous. Yes, effective. Absolutely. Water also gave cavemen a sneaky performance boost. Before long runs or hunts, some tribes soaked their feet in cold streams for a few minutes. This pre-cooled the skin, letting them endure hot terrain longer before burning set in. Think of it as the caveman equivalent of sports science cryotherapy, minus the cryo chamber and Instagram bragging rights. And let's not forget rivers as treadmills. Cavemen sometimes walked in shallow water, letting currents massage their soles and wash away grit. This wasn't just cleaning, it toughened the skin gently while keeping it supple. A barefoot walk downstream was basically the Stone Age version of a spa day combined with endurance training, relaxation, and conditioning in one package. Of course, water and mud weren't miracle cures if you were reckless. Stay in cold streams too long, and your feet went numb. Bad news when you still had 10 miles left to walk. Too much mud, and your skin softened, making it easier to rip open later. Cavemen figured out balance. Soak just enough to soothe, smear just enough mud to protect, then get moving again before your feet turn pruny. Modern barefoot trekkers can steal this trick. Got hot pavement burns? Dunk your feet in a fountain. Blisters forming? Coat them with a bit of wet clay or mud clean mud. Please not city sewer sludge. Hiking barefoot and desperate? Wrap your toes with damp leaves. It may not look pretty, but who cares about style points when you're trying not to bleed on the trail? Here's the hidden genius. Cavemen didn't see water and mud as nuisances. They saw them as allies. Rain turned paths into foot cushions. Muddy riverbanks became natural shock absorbers. Even puddles were blessings, a free cooling station in the middle of nowhere. What modern hikers dread, cavemen embraced. That shift in mindset kept them alive, because here's the deal. No matter how tough your feet are, they need rescue breaks. Even the best armor dents after battle. Cavemen didn't quit when their soles screamed. They treated, cooled, and patched them up. That's why they could walk for days, barefoot, without collapsing. Water and mud weren't just comfort, they were survival tools. So next time you're barefoot and suffering, remember, you don't need sneakers. You need a puddle. All right, you've toughened up your soles, learned how to flirt with mud puddles, and you're feeling invincible. But here's the million-dollar barefoot question. Do you go fast or do you go far? Cavemen wrestled with this every day. Should you sprint like a panicked gazelle and risk shredding your feet, or pace yourself like a tired donkey and maybe never catch dinner? Welcome to the eternal balance of speed versus endurance, the Stone Age's version of dude. I chugged this energy drink or sipped water slowly. Let's start with speed. Caveman sprinted when survival demanded it. Saber-toothed tiger behind you. Better believe you're not power walking with proper posture. Sprinting barefoot has a thrill. Your feet slap the earth like war drums. Adrenaline pumps, and you feel untouchable. But reality hits fast. Bare soles on sharp ground at high speed equals maximum carnage. Sprinting multiplies impact. What might have been a tolerable pebble at walking pace now feels like stepping on a medieval spike trap. Cavemen knew this, which is why sprinting was always short bursts, never long hauls. But here's the twist. Sprinting had advantages beyond not getting eaten. A short, high-speed dash could get you across dangerous terrain before it shredded your skin. Think of hot sand at midday. You don't stroll across that. You dash like your feet are frying eggs. Same with thorn patches or rocky strips sometimes. Going fast meant less time in contact with pain. Cavemen were masters of calculated bursts. Speed to escape danger, then immediately slow down to preserve the souls. Now, endurance stat was the true caveman game. Persistence hunting, one of the oldest survival tactics, wasn't about being the fastest. It was about being stubborn. Imagine this. You're chasing an antelope. It sprints like lightning, disappears over the horizon. But you keep jogging, steady and relentless. Hours later, the antelope collapses from exhaustion. And there you are, sweaty but alive, ready to eat. That's endurance. And it only works if your feet don't fall apart mid-journey. Endurance walking and running required rhythm. Cavemen found a stride that minimized shock. Mid-foot landings, light steps, almost like bouncing. They didn't slam their heels like modern joggers in sneakers. They floated, conserving energy, letting gravity do half the work. Barefoot endurance was about efficiency, not heroics. You couldn't look cool stomping around. You had to look like you were gliding, even if you were dying inside. And here's the thing, endurance built community. Sprinting was solo, every caveman for himself. But endurance, that's where tribes moved together. They matched pace, rested as a group, and kept a steady march across insane distances. Feet had to last, which meant learning when to push and when to pause. You don't burn out your souls early. You ration them like food. That balance was survival, plain and simple. There's also the ego factor. Sprinting made you feel powerful, like a hero in an action movie. Endurance humbled you, it whispered. Relax, slow down. This is going to suck for hours. Caveman, who didn't listen, ended up limping, bleeding, and begging for help. The wise ones, those who mastered endurance, outlived. The sprinters, they didn't just survive longer, they survived life. Modern barefoot adventurers face the same trap. You start running fast, showing off. 10 minutes later, your arches are on fire. Your toes are blistered, and suddenly you're the joke of the trail. The trick is to copy cavemen. Sprint when it counts, endure when it matters. Save speed for emergencies or short bursts across killer terrain. Spend most of your energy mastering the art of the steady plod. It's not glamorous, but it gets you home in one piece. Cavemen also knew how to mix the two. They'd use intervals before intervals were cool. Walk, jog, sprint, walk. It kept prey guessing and gave feet a mix of stress and rest. By alternating, they built strength without blowing out their souls. Think of it like natural cross-training, minus the overpriced gym membership. And here's the comedic truth. Endurance made cavemen the original ultramarathon. Modern runners brag about 26 miles in sneakers. Cavemen did triple that barefoot, carrying spears, dodging predators, and still complaining less than we do today. They didn't just pick speed or endurance, they balanced both, and it made them masters of survival. So, the lesson is simple. Don't choose sides. Be the caveman who sprints when chased and strolls when safe. Pace yourself or you'll flame out fast. Because in the Stone Age, the guy who sprinted too long died tired. The guy who paced himself got dinner by now. You're stomping around like you've got caveman superpowers, feet armored, pace, balanced, mud-coated souls keeping you alive. But let's not kid ourselves. Even the toughest barefoot warrior isn't invincible. Pain is always lurking, and danger is sneaky. Cavemen knew this better than anyone. They didn't have hospitals, antibiotics, or comfy beds to collapse into. If their feet broke down, their entire survival chain snapped. That's why they became experts at listening to the whispers of pain and spotting danger signals before disaster struck. First, let's talk about pain, the annoying alarm system your body uses to scream. Hey dummy, stop before you wreck yourself. Cavemen didn't ignore pain. They interpreted sharp, stabbing pain under the arch. That wasn't just a rocket, could be a torn tendon or inflamed tissue. Burning heat on the soul. That meant blisters forming. A ticking time bomb ready to pop. Dull throbbing that got worse every step. That was swelling. The first step toward an injury that could bench you for days. Cavemen treated pain like language. Every sensation was a message. They even had a hierarchy of pain. Annoying pain was acceptable. Keep walking. Grit your teeth. No big deal. Warning pain meant slow down, adjust your gait, maybe find softer terrain. Emergency pain meant stop now or risk crippling yourself. You didn't push through emergency pain unless you were being chased by a lion. Otherwise, pushing through was a one-way ticket to infection, limping, and eventually being left behind by the tribe. And trust me, no one waits for the limping guy when mammoth meat is on the line. Now, the nastier danger, infection. Cavemen didn't know about bacteria, but they sure knew what rot looked like. Step on a thorn that breaks the skin, and within a day, redness spreads. Within 2, pus oozes out. Leave it untreated, and suddenly your foot is hotter than a fire pit, and you're hallucinating from fever. In modern times, you'd rush to urgent care. In caveman times, you hoped the village healer had some moss and magic prayers. Infection was death in slow motion, and cavemen learned to treat small wounds with paranoia. That's why they were obsessed with cleaning their feet. Streams weren't just for cooling, they were antiseptic stations. Cavemen washed out cuts religiously, then packed wounds with crushed plants, resin, or even ash to keep bugs and rot out. They didn't always know why it worked, but they knew it bought time. And time, in the Stone Age, was the difference between healing and becoming saber-toothed snack food. Then there was structural danger. Sprains, twists, fractures. Cavemen couldn't afford to be clumsy. One bad ankle roll on a hidden rock and your hunting career was over. That's why they trained balance, obsessively standing on one foot, hopping, weaving across uneven logs. They weren't just playing. They were rehearsing for disaster. If they did twist an ankle, they had crude splints ready sticks tied with bark strips. Not glamorous, but enough to keep moving at half speed until the tribe found shelter. Another hidden danger, numbness. Cavemen noticed that when feet went numb from cold, injury followed. Frostbite wasn't a word yet, but the blackened, useless toes told the story. They learned to spot early signs. Skin pale, tingling, fading into nothing, movement sluggish. That was the cue to warm up by fire, or rub feet furiously until feeling returned. Ignore it, and you'd lose more than just sensation, you'd lose toes. And in a world where every toe helped you balance and run, that was game over. Even posture gave away danger. Cavemen watched each other's gaits like hawks. If someone started limping subtly, if steps grew shorter or weight shifted unevenly, the tribe noticed. Why? Because a limping hunter slowed everyone down. They'd intervene early forced rest, apply herbal packs, redistribute tasks, because one broken foot could doom an entire group. Feet weren't personal problems. They were communal survival assets. Modern barefoot wanderers can learn from this. Don't dismiss pain as weakness. Pain is data. Is it sharp, dull, burning, or throbbing? Each has meaning. Treat cuts instantly. If redness spreads, act fast. If swelling increases, stop. If numbness creeps in, warm up. And always check your guide tip. You're compensating unconsciously. You're already on the road to injury. Here's the comedic side. Cavemen probably joked about it too. Imagine one guy limping back to camp, swollen foot dragging, while his buddies mocked him. Nice job, rock kisser. Maybe next time look where you're stepping. But behind the teasing was real fear because, in the Stone Age, a single blister could spiral into tragedy. The tribe learned to laugh, but also to act. Because pain ignored was death invited. In short, cavemen weren't reckless tough guys. They were pain analysts, danger whisperers, and amateur podiatrists rolled into one. They had to be, because survival wasn't about pretending pain didn't exist. It was about respecting it, decoding it, and responding before it wrecked your only means of transport. You're a bear. Battered feet. By now. You've warmed up your caveman feet. Learned to read terrain like a barefoot detective. Built callous armor, soaked in mud spouts, balanced speed and endurance, and even listened to pain like it's the voice of your ancestors, whispering, stop being stupid. But here's the kicker. Survival isn't about one trek. It's about doing this day after day, mile after mile, without turning your souls into shredded meatloaf. Cavemen didn't just survive single journeys. They mastered long-term hacks that made barefoot travel sustainable. The first hack, rotation of pace and rest. Cavemen weren't robots. They didn't march at full throttle from sunrise to sunset. They broke the day into cycles walk, steady pause, cool feet, continue. Every break was a micro-repair session. Feet soaked in streams, mud reapplied, cuts checked. Think of it as pit stops in a prehistoric NASCAR race. Without them, you'd burn out before you even spotted the mammoth herd. Hack number 2, nighttime recovery rituals. When the day's miles were done, cavemen treated their feet like royalty. They rubbed them with animal fat to keep skin from cracking, massaged arches to release tension, and wrapped them in soft moss or fur for warmth. Forget scented candles, this was caveman self-care. They knew tomorrow's survival depended on today's recovery. Skip it, and you'd wake up with stiff, useless claws instead of functioning feet. Hack 3. Terrain choice. Over time, long-distance cavemen didn't always take the shortest path. They took the survivable one. Softer ground may add distance, but it preserved the feet. Avoiding rocky ridges or thorn fields meant arriving slower, yes, but also arriving at all. It was the long game. Protect your souls first, chase glory second. Today, we call that efficiency. Back then, they called it not dying. Hack 4. Tribal teamwork. Cavemen didn't always trek alone. They rotated tasks. One guy carried more weight while another rested his injured foot. They scouted terrain together, shouted warnings, sharp rocks ahead, and sometimes even carried each other when feet failed. You think pride stopped them? Nope. Pride didn't fill bellies. Survival meant swallowing ego and leaning sometimes literally in your tribe. Hack 5. Mental endurance. Cavemen weren't just tough physically. They were Jedi-level tough in the brain. Walking 20 miles barefoot wasn't just painful, it was boring. The monotony could break you before the blisters did. So they told stories, sang chants, drummed rhythms with their spears. Distraction wasn't fluff, it was survival psychology. Keep the brain entertained, and the feet kept moving. Hack 6. Adapting seasonally. Barefoot travel wasn't the same year-round. In summer, cavemen planned treks at dawn and dusk to avoid scorching ground. In rainy season, mud became both savior and trap, so they walked carefully, shuffling instead of stomping. In winter, they used animal hides as temporary wraps, warming feet by fires between stretches. They adapted constantly, turning feet into seasonal tools rather than one-size-fits-all gear. Hack 7. Foot pre-training. Even on days they weren't trekking, cavemen conditioned their souls. Kids grew up running barefoot games. Hunters practiced sprints on gravel patches, and elders taught balance drills. Their culture built tough feet long before journeys began. By adulthood, their soles were tougher than half the modern shoes you can buy. In other words, the long-term hack wasn't just recovery, it was a lifestyle. And here's the last, biggest hack. Respect the feet. Cavemen knew their entire existence depended on those two battered platforms. Feet were sacred, not an afterthought. They weren't ashamed of scars or calluses. They flaunted them as proof of endurance. The long-term secret wasn't about tricks or shortcuts. It was about building a relationship with the ground, treating pain as a teacher, and caring for the skin that carried them through life. So, if you want to travel long distances barefoot without destroying yourself, don't think like a modern weekend warrior. Think like a caveman strategist. Rotate pace. Recover daily. Choose terrain wisely. Rely on your tribe. Distract your brain. Adapt to seasons. And pre-train relentlessly. In short, don't just walk barefoot. Live barefoot. Because in the end, cavemen didn't just survive barefoot journeys. They thrived. They turned suffering into wisdom, pain into callous armor, and endless miles into proof that humans are the stubbornest animals on the planet. Shoes may have made us soft, but the hacks of the barefoot masters are still there, waiting for anyone crazy enough to kick them off and try.